Hello, I'm really delighted to be with you to share some of my experiences at this great MIT Grand Hacking Medicine event. I'm a physician and also a developer. I've been involved in medical informatics for a long time. And I'd like to spend the next few minutes talking to you about FHIR, why it's so important, and how you could manage FHIR APIs, because FHIR inherently is the newest API in medical informatics. My name is Patrick Jameson. I'm a physician, a neurologist by training, but I'm also the product manager for Iris for Health. And in that role, I get to see a lot of innovative new applications and some of the technology that goes behind them. So one of those technologies, in fact, a very important technology that is fairly new on the healthcare scene, is FHIR. This stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. And as standards go, it's so new. It was published first as a draft in 2014, but it's quickly becoming the standard for healthcare data exchange. And, for people who have not been involved in standards, the last standard that we had in medicine, HL7v2, was designed roughly about 45 years ago. So this is really a new entrant, but it's opening up great new possibilities for innovative apps. So what was the motivation for creating this brand new standard? Well, there are many continued problems in the healthcare sector, including a lack of data exchange that detracts from patient care. It leads to poorer health outcomes and higher cost. There are a lot of barriers to patients' access of health information. Many of you maybe have tried to get your health information, and it's not easy. You can't just use an app. You might be able to use a patient portal. You might even have to request a fax of your information. So information doesn't flow seamlessly from different parts of the healthcare system. It certainly doesn't flow seamlessly between payers, providers, and patients. Thus, care is really not truly coordinated. And that's a big motivation for creating this new standard. Other reasons were that claims data was hard for providers to access and get a full 360 view of the patient. Patients found it difficult to find where providers were included, who was included in their health plan. And it was very hard for patients to shop around for health care. In fact, learn just what some of the benefits are in terms of their medications, like the formulary. FHIR came along because it really needed to modernize healthcare APIs. It's truly an improved technical standard. It's based on current web standards, both JSON and REST. It has both integrated transport and security mechanisms built in, and most importantly, it has better semantic interoperability. There are still some data normalization issues, but it's much easier to understand exactly the kind of data that you're being requesting from any given source in the healthcare system and understand what that means semantically. One thing that's given FHIR a major boost is this thing called the final rule that came out in May from the Office of the National Coordinator and the Center for Medicare Services. They have now standardized their approach to APIs in healthcare, mandating that we use FHIR for data exchange. And they're also mandating that information blocking between different players in the healthcare system will no longer be tolerated. What this means is that patients will have easier access to their data through FHIR, so that they'll be able to get claims and encounter information using a third-party application of their choice. And just think, this means that you can develop that third-party application and get access to healthcare data on behalf of the patient. Providers must serve up a subset of clinical information that's most relevant to patient care, called the US CDI. And here is some of the data that's part of the US CDI. As you can see, it's a fairly complete data set. It doesn't have everything, but in time, more and more information will become accessible through FHIR. First, what is FHIR API management? What are we talking about, and why would I want it? How can it benefit you? Is it hard to get started? Can you show me how it works? Just these simple questions that I think we could cover in the next 20 minutes. Well, some of you may know FHIR is gaining tremendously in momentum, especially in the United States, because of the Office for the National Coordinator that has mandated FHIR as a messaging standard between health systems. So there are lots of good FHIR use cases that are emerging. The first is building the next wave in digital healthcare applications. Secondly, collecting mobile device and patient data for analytics repository, doing population health measurement, but also providing data back to the patient. And then finally, new ways of sharing information between players in the healthcare system, such as payers and providers. As you are well aware, Intersystems has always had a deep commitment to FHIR. We've been actively engaged in the evolution of the FHIR standard. We have had for years a broad and deep support for FHIR and Smart on FHIR, both at the server and client. We make it easy to integrate legacy data by providing built-in transformations between things like HL7v2 and FHIR. And recently, we've created a FHIR team so that we have one FHIR stack across all our products. That includes Intersystems Iris for Health, HealthShare, and TrackCare. So you may be wondering, what is API management all about? Well, we use APIs all the time in doing any kind of development. As we create these, we're going to increasingly face a number of problems. First, how are we going to disseminate that knowledge of exactly how to use those APIs? That's the beginning of the API lifecycle. We've got to publish them. We have to describe them in a way that other developers can make use of these APIs. Secondly, we need to think about security and access control and policies related to security. So who needs to be authenticated? Which users can see which resources? We need to have a structure to enforce this. We could build this, of course, at the application level, but this gets increasingly difficult, especially when we have to consider multiple mechanisms of security. We'd like to analyze usage statistics so we know who's using it and how popular they are and what additional resources we may need to scale our servers to take into account the increased traffic. So we want to do things like performance reporting, and importantly, we'd like a gateway between our servers that we're managing and our client applications on the front end. And that's all included in an API management framework that I'm going to show you. So why is API management especially important for FHIR? Well, FHIR is another kind of REST API. And so very much we need to expose FHIR services. How are we going to access these? What parameters do we need to provide in the API request? FHIR servers have a lot of protected health information. We need to secure them. And there might be multiple ways to do this. And we'd like a framework to help us secure that server. We need to scale FHIR services. Might be great to build a prototype or a demo, but what happens when we get thousands and thousands of requests for FHIR services? We want to be able to manage that easily. We need to have an audit trail so we know who accessed our server, and we need to be able to log these requests and responses. And as I mentioned in the last slide, we want to have some performance reporting. Give me some metrics, and I'm going to show you that in a demo in just a little bit. Now, just to level set, I'd like to give you a few API management terms that come up over and over again. They're actually quite simple. We have a concept of a service. This is really the FHIR server in our case. It's the endpoint. So that endpoint is what the gateway will use to refer to what is known as the upstream API. We specify then routes between our gateway, our API management gateway, and these services. We could specify multiple routes, and the nice thing is we could control security or other features that are very route specific. And then finally we have the idea of a consumer. These are the clients or the end users of the API. They're going to be used for security and logging. We want to be able to manage them and get performance statistics around them. So this gives you kind of an overall architectural diagram, very high level. Intersystems API Manager uses a Kong gateway, a partner that we've selected. It sits between your client application, the API client, and the upstream targets, which are, in our case, today, the FHIR servers. And these can be either on premises or in the cloud. The gateway has a number of great features, including plugins that allow you to do all kinds of things like security, rate limiting, and it allows also you to be able to create routes, and you could use it as a load balancer. So why did we select Kong Enterprise for API management? Well, very simply, it's a highly scalable product that is very important when you're developing enterprise level applications. Modular, so that you install and configure the plugins that you need that make sense for your development. And then finally, it runs on any infrastructure. So you can deploy it in the cloud or on-prem or a hybrid. That's exactly what most of our customers want and demand. Another aspect of the Intersystems API Manager is this development portal. And this is something I've shown in the past, but I'll show it today, that makes it easy to understand FHIR. FHIR is kind of a complex standard. Many developers are just learning it. They need to see exactly what resources are called along which paths and with what parameters. And the development portal is a great way to get started in understanding FHIR. What it uses at its core is the OpenAPI Specification. So you could really describe any API using OpenAPI. That tells you things like the endpoints, the interactions like get, post, delete, update, etc., the paths to the resources, what parameters are required to get a response, and then the actual responses themselves in terms of you could list all the potential response codes that come back from your HTTP request. One of the things that's built in is a API catalog for FHIR. We built this so that it would make it easier for you to understand what you can query from our FHIR server. And this catalog is something I'll show you in just a second. So here's kind of another diagram that puts it in maybe a little sharper focus. We have a number of clients. They're going to all hit this API gateway. We can configure that API gateway through an admin GUI, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that in a second. That API gateway then communicates with upstreams such as a FHIR service in the cloud or on premises, and a number of other services such as Prometheus and Grafana, which are used for monitoring and visualization of FHIR metrics. Well, enough of that. Let's go right to the demo, and we'll then take questions for the Q&A. Now I'm back in the IAM dev portal, and I want to now secure my routes so that effectively authenticated access is necessary. What I could do here is I could go and create a plugin that could do that for me. So what I'm going to do here is add a new plugin, and I'm going to enable key authentication. I'm going to just enable it on the service, so I'll just create that. And now I could effectively make every user of this have a authorization key. So that gets us to the next big topic, and that's consumers. Here we have one FHIR user, and I've already set up credentials for this. I've generated a key called FHIR PM2. So that what this means now is if we want to access any information in the server, we're going to have to give that key. So let's take a look at that and see if that has actually been enabled. Well, I built a FHIR query app, and this app allows me to add keys, API keys. And so I'm going to add FHIR PM2. It's already selected. I'll submit that. Now let's see if I can access a resource. I'll go to FHIR R4. I'll generate a patient query, and let's generate patient 6. We know that works. I'll submit that, and you see we get back in the query, we get back the patient. We get the resources and all the information related to the patient. Now let's see if we change that, what would happen if we added the API key. Instead of FHIR PM2, let's just put FHIR PM3. Submit that. And we'll just do the same query again. And now you see that we have a forbidden code here, and we can't even retrieve the metadata because we don't have the right key. So I'm going to put that back, obviously, and we'll now take a look at another topic, FHIR monitoring. So lastly, I want to show you about how we could monitor the FHIR service. One plugin you could easily add is a plugin called Prometheus. This you could add as a plugin, and what it'll do is it collects metrics directly from the Kong API system. Once that's installed, we can use a visualization tool like Grafana. Now, I don't have time to talk about how to configure this, but it's actually pretty simple. You can manage your dashboards and import additional dashboards. And in the case of Kong, there's an official dashboard at 7424 that you could load, and it comes pre-configured. So that's pretty handy. So we'll go back to dashboards, and I'll use that Kong official dashboard. And you could see already we've made some requests on the system. And let's get the request in the last 5 minutes or so. We're going to basically now do some additional requests on this system. I want to generate some additional queries with my query builder tool, which you could learn about more in the FHIR search lecture. In this case, I'm going to do a patient query, and I'm going to do it by address city, and I'll do Woburn here. And if we submit that, we get a query back, and there's a total of 3 patients in this bundle. What's interesting here is you can go to the history page, and here's how we could run a bunch of queries. We could select, let's say, patient 6, and then this patient with Woburn. And now let's go ahead and add, well, let's make it 100 queries of each. So I'll go down to 100, and then I'll run these queries. And it's going to take a little bit of time, but we will get back the 200 queries have been now completed. Let's take a look then at our dashboard here. And you could see already we're getting a number of requests per second is going up. And we see the total request, total requests by different routes. We could look at things like the bandwidth of the system and the egress and ingress of data coming into the server. So that's kind of, again, a very whirlwind tour, but I wanted to show you could easily use a number of tools with API Manager that effectively can be configured through plugins. And I know there's a lot more to this topic, and I'll be happy to take your questions. Thanks.